and then he goes straight over the top of a last defender and scores a brilliant try.
Look at this again. There could be no doubt. Forget about the booing.
I always thought to myself I was the best player in my position.
How do you stop a man this big when he's faster than your fastest player? The truth is, rugby never figured it out. But there was one opponent that Jonah Lomu could never run away from. This isn't the story of rugby's greatest superstar. It's the story of the battle that almost stole him from the world. Before Jonah Lomu, most people couldn't name any rugby player. After Jonah, the whole world could. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. His greatest battle wasn't on the rugby field. Before 1995, rugby had great players, but it didn't have a global superstar. Outside traditional rugby nations, most people couldn't name a single player. That would change in just a few weeks. Not because of a team, not because of a tournament, because of one man. When Jonah Lomu first appeared, people thought they were looking at a mistake. A winger wasn't supposed to look like that. He stood around 1.96 meters tall. He weighed about 119 kilograms. Most players his size played in the forwards. Jonah did the opposite. He outran the fastest backs in the world, and when defenders tried to stop him, they usually ended up on the ground. There had never been a rugby player built like him. Not at international level, not with that speed, not with that power, but before he became the most feared player on the earth, he was just a teenager from South Auckland chasing the same dream as thousands of other New Zealand kids. A dream that almost seemed impossible, because nobody knew that his greatest opponent wasn't waiting on the other team. It was already inside his body. Every generation produced talented players, fast players, strong players, players who dominate school rugby. Jonah Lomu wasn't just dominating, he was confusing people. Coaches looked at him and didn't know what they were seeing. A winger wasn't supposed to be this big. Forwards weren't supposed to move that fast. Nothing about Jonah made sense. At Wesley College, one of New Zealand's most respected rugby schools, his talent became impossible to ignore. Defenders who had always been the biggest on the field suddenly found themselves getting bumped off. It wasn't because Jonah wanted to embarrass them. It was because nobody had ever built a game plan to stop someone like him. The impossible was becoming normal. Selectors noticed. Then New Zealand noticed. Before long, Jonah earned a place in the New Zealand Sevens team. Most young players would have been overwhelmed. Jonah looked like he belonged. Every tournament, every carry, every performance felt like another warning. Something special was coming. Then, a At just 19 years old, the phone call arrived. The All Blacks wanted him. No player that young had ever worn the black jersey in history. But history wasn't interesting in waiting, because the biggest stage in rugby was only months away. The year was 1995. South Africa was hosting the Rugby World Cup. The tournament carried enormous significance. It was the first World Cup hosted by South Africa after the end of apartheid. The entire world was watching. New Zealand arrived with a talented squad. Nobody expected one teenager to become the story of the tournament. At first, Jonah was simply another player wearing black. Then, the matches began. He wasn't just scoring tries. He was changing the way rugby looked. Defenders who normally made dominant tackles were suddenly hanging off one man. Crowds couldn't believe what they were seeing. Commentators could barely describe it. Then came the semi-final against England. One moment, one run, one image. Jonah charged towards the English defence. Mike Cat stepped in front of him. For a split second, it looked like the tackle had been made. Instead, Lomu ran straight through him. Not around him, through him. The image travelled across newspapers, television screens, and magazine covers all around the world. It became one of the most famous moments in rugby history. By the end of the tournament, Jonah had scored 7 tries. He finished as the competition's top try scorer. New Zealand lost the final to South Africa, but something far bigger had happened. For the first time, people who had never watched rugby knew exactly one name: Jonah Lomu. He had become the face of the sport, the most famous rugby player on earth. It looked like nothing could stop him. But while the world celebrated, Jonah was beginning a battle nobody could see. A battle that would threaten everything. For years, defenders tried everything. They tackled him high, tackled him low. Sometimes they needed 3 players just to bring him down. The biggest, the strongest, the fastest, none of them could stop Jonah Lomu. But the greatest opponent of his life was never standing across from him. It was inside his own body. Not long after the 1995 World Cup, Jonah received news that would change his life forever. He had nephrotic syndrome, a serious kidney disease. The man who looked indestructible was suddenly fighting something he couldn't see. At first, he refused to let it define him. He kept playing, kept scoring, kept inspiring millions, because that's who Jonah was. The world saw an unstoppable superstar. Very few people understood the pain, the exhaustion, or the fear he carried away from the field. After the years passed, his condition became harder to hide. Training became more difficult. recovery took longer. Eventually, his kidneys began to fail. The sport's most unstoppable runner was now spending hours connected to a dialysis machine just to stay alive. Imagine that. The player who once outran the fastest athletes on this earth was now fighting simply to see another day. Then, in 2004, hope arrived. Jonah received a kidney transplant. For many people, that would have been the end of the story. Not for Jonah, because even after everything, he still wanted one thing: to play rugby again. Some athletes are reminded for records, others for trophies. Jonah Lomu became something much bigger. He became the reason millions of people fell in love with rugby. He showed the world that size didn't have to slow you down, that power could be beautiful, that one player really could change an entire sport. Children copied the way he ran. Young players dreamed of wearing number 11 because of him. Stadiums filled because people wanted to witness something they had never seen before. Then, on the 18th of November 2015, rugby lost its greatest superstar. Jonah Lomu passed away at just 40 years old. The news shocked the sporting world. Tributes poured in from teammates, opponents, and fans across the globe. Not because of the trophies he's won, not because of the tries he scored, but because of the lives he inspired. Years later, the game has changed. Players are faster, stronger, fitter. But every time someone asks, who changed rugby forever? The answer is still the same. Because some players become champions, some become legends. Jonah Lomu became something even rarer. He became unforgettable. Before Jonah, rugby had stars. After Jonah, rugby had a global icon. And maybe that's why, nearly 30 years later, we're still searching for the next Jonah Lomu. But here's the real question. Did rugby change Jonah Lomu's life? Or did Jonah Lomu change rugby forever?